Nice. Yeah, I want to touch on all that a little more too. I think the move to Python is excellent. It's one of the only languages that I've like had some success learning myself.
Sure.
I do think it's very simple and clean, and I'm a big fan of Python myself. I did want to ask you though, do you think that's the primary barrier to entry? We saw Oculus announce this week that they're moving over to Arbitrum.
Big
They
mistake.
mentioned number of customers, which kind of brings another broader point that I want to touch on a little
Sure.
later discussion. But
Yeah.
I wonder, do you think I think that's certainly a barrier to entry, but do you think it's the biggest one?
So I think it's a great question, and there's no absolutes, and it's just my
Mhm.
opinion, and so it's not
Of course.
necessarily. I think awareness and adoption are two huge things that we got to sort out. I think that is like now the biggest problem: awareness and adoption, right?
Mhm.
Getting customers in the door, getting retail users. But first, I think first had to come structure, order, and ease of use. And we've brought that, whether it's better standardization on the ARCs or the Algorand request for comments, which are, essentially, here's how you do an NFT. Here's how you do a mutable NFT. Here's how you do a smart contract that does this or that. Here's how you do multisig. Those things had to be nailed down. And now, under Bruno's leadership, under Stefan Barroso's leadership, we are now getting to a place where we have better and better standards.
Mhm.
We needed to bring ease of use as well because yeah, sure, folks finance, the tiny mans of this world, or previously the algofis of this world, they'll find smart people who can figure out teal and roll a product of the complexity and sophistication of something like folks finance or algofi or tiny man or whatever, or lofty or whatever. But that is not easy, and it kind of filters straight away. It filters a lot of talented people who just are not in
Mhm.
that kind of top 1% of engineers to figure that level of stuff out, and you lose so much value. And so for me, bringing AlgoKit, bringing Python, normalizing it in Visual Studio Code, that is like reducing that filter way down. So yeah, there's still some people
Mhm.
who will find it hard to do, but like the net is cast so much wider. And so I do feel, having worked on Ethereum since this is like 2015, I was working professionally there, um, and worked on Cardano, watched Cardano really launch its contracts, watched Cardano really make the smart contract language sing when I was there. Um, I do think it starts with developers. I do think it starts with, just like the iPhone, it starts with an app store.
Mhm.
When the iPhone first shipped, it didn't have an app store. It had 9 apps or something, or 8 apps, and they were on the home screen. And they didn't even fill. There wasn't two home screens. Only one home screen, and there was like camera,
Mhm.
notes, call, SMS, and that was kind of it. And so that was, of course, it was great for your photos with the pinchy thing for the first time with
Mhm.
multi-touch. But
Right.
but it but it didn't have like I want to see what color this is because I want to buy the paint. I'll just get an app that can
Right.
do that. And so
Mhm.
the iPhone became ubiquitous, or smartphones became ubiquitous, more so when they had an app for that app for that thing with the app stores. And so I feel it's very similar in Web3. You got to have a metropolis, a hive of activity. And so that starts with developers. It starts with empowering people to use this thing. And then
Mhm.
when there's a glut of applications and a glut of cool things to do on the chain, that's where you get retail, that's where you get adoption. And I think ultimately that's how you win. That's my thesis on it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm right, but I think it starts with developers.
No, I think that's great because I'm glad you brought up the iPhone because that brings up another like discussion point that I want to bring up. So most people when they use an iPhone, like they have no idea about like what's in the guts of it. They don't know anything about flash memory or the processors or whatever. They just think, hey, cool, fun thing to use, right?
Yeah,
And that it took a long time to get to that. Back in like the late 70s, early 80s, like to use a computer, like you kind of had to develop kind of a skill set just to be a user of it. I mean, I remember as a kid, we had a computer and I had to like read this manual and just basically follow everything in the manual just to get it to do like
sure.
basic stuff, right? And like we've gone all the way to like the GUI phase where things became more intuitive, then onto the iPhone phase where most people using it, they don't have to care what's in the guts of it. And there's not really like a barrier to entry in terms of skill set or what have you. I mean, there's some people that are like power users that know all the little tricks and stuff, but to me, crypto in general is kind of in that late 70s, early 80s stage where it's like a lot of specialized people. And we were kind of talking about this on the stream a little bit, where I was helping someone who's like maybe 10 years older than me, like set up a para wallet for the first time. And like a lot of this stuff, like even I would take for granted, that I had to like talk her through. It's like, oh no, you gotta write down those words in order, like put little numbers next to them so you know where they go.
Yeah.
Like, and that's just stuff I wouldn't even think about because I'm like in the mix here. And I guess my to frame it as a question is, how do you see us getting from where we are now? Well, first off, I'd ask if you agree with that assessment, and if you do, how do we get to the GUI phase? What does that look like? How do we get to the iPhone phase, etc.?
Yeah, great question. And I do agree. And, I remember one of my earliest memories was getting Mortal Kombat, the original Mortal Kombat, not like the reboot Mortal Kombat, working on an IBM 386 DX40 that my uncle gave me when I was like 8. Okay. And
Yes.
it required understanding like floppy disks, understanding how to use PK unzip at the command line to like unzip the files, understanding how to like change directories. And then when I finally understood, okay, I type MK and hit enter to run the executable to start the app to play Mortal Kombat, I'd get a message saying executable greater than the largest executable program size. And that was DOS telling me that I needed to move things into the high memory area, like the mouse driver, or I needed to make more memory for the executable to fit into the thing. And so, or to fit into executable space. And so I remember getting it working after like looking through a big manual and found a command called memmaker that made more executable space. And that's what we're at. That's where we're at right now. And that's because I was a geeky kid. I really wanted to play Mortal Kombat, but I'm sure there's lots of kids who would have just gone outside and played football.
Right.
And so I totally agree. Now, if you want to play Mortal Kombat, you go to Steam, you type Mortal Kombat, you hit enter, you click play. I mean, that's it, right? So we are absolutely going to go to a place if crypto is as successful, if self-sovereign digital assets are as successful as I think they are going to be, we absolutely will get to a place where they are ubiquitous and have the same ease of use as your cell phone. How does that happen? I think there's a whole multitude of different things. Number one, it's got to be somewhat imperceptible. I mean, the same way you don't worry about TLS 1.3 or QUIC or HTTPS when you're browsing the web. I think largely a lot of this stuff will be hidden from the user. But for the parts that we have to make sure we don't hide, because it's important, for example, maybe users who do want to have that self-sovereignty over their key material so that they do truly own the assets themselves, not custodied by some company that could maybe go bust. For users who do want that extra control, we still have to improve the user experience, as we have done with AlgoKit for the developer experience. And I think that starts with things like decentralized key recovery, a scheme that makes it easier to store and manage the keys so that you don't have people who are in their 60s or 70s who go to look at their retirement pot and find that they can't access it. So it's a whole range of things, from interaction to custody and even to, of course, development. But I do think we're going to get there, and I do think that it's critical. And if you look at most of the things that I'm focused on from a tech point of view, it's usually around the user experience, whether that's DevRel helping with code, Bruno helping with standards, Stefan helping with standards, or indeed the stuff we're doing with Alexandro and AlgoKit. It's all about making it easy to use. And if you don't do that and you keep it in a place where it's hard to use, they're never going to come.